backpack show. You'll see that Chris is not here. He kind of gutted his place, and there's a little bit of an internet issue. So it's the backpack show with me and special guest Dorie Clark. She is an author, speaker. She wrote Reinventing You, Entrepreneurial You. She has a new book out called The Long Game. We're going to talk all about that, mitigating career risk, all kinds of things. And actually, we were chatting backstage so much because I love her that I was sort of forgetting to start the show. So I guess I better do that.
Hi, everyone. Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Carrie Gargone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show.
So people are so excited. Joel already commented, you're one of the good ones over on LinkedIn. Thanks, Joel. And Elizabeth says, Buenos dias, backpackers. So the things that you've been talking about forever, Dorie, I feel like now are more relevant than ever. So I discovered you like back in the day with Reinventing You. And that was when personal branding was kind of like a new concept, if you want to call it that. Now it's more relevant than ever because during the pandemic, people were either losing their jobs and having to do something totally else, or their whole industry dried up for a while, or they were just like, I might die someday. I'm going to die someday. I need to do something, that I love. So has there been like a resurgence of interest that you've noticed in Reinventing You? What kinds of concepts that you wrote then still apply today?
Yeah, it absolutely, Carrie. In fact, I have my bookshelf of props. This was my first book, Reinventing You. Right. Oh my, yeah. Let's have a competition.
Hey, that's not fair. That one's not out yet.
You called it. Okay, fine. Yes, I'm competing with books that have not officially been released yet. Because as Carrie knows, my next book is coming out 1 week from tomorrow, The Long Game. But yes, to your point, you were exactly right. Reinvention has, I think, been on everyone's mind these days, either because we have been forced into reinvention or we have chosen it. And essentially, a lot of people are just saying like, peace out. I am going to change my career. I'm going to change my life, or I'm going to change my locale. And sometimes that, depending on companies' acceptance of virtual work, that may or may not necessitate a change of job. So a lot of people have been reevaluating who they are and where they want to be, which is fantastic. This is very exciting of a moment, but also stressful. And so one of the key points that I make in Reinventing You that I think is perhaps especially relevant these days is we sometimes erroneously make the assumption that other people are just going to intuit somehow about our reinvention, that they're going to get, oh, of course, that's why she's doing it, and she's going to be great in this new role. I can totally see her there. The truth is, most people are not that creative, and they are too busy to extend even a moment's thought trying to figure out, oh, where could she fit? How could her skills fit in? They have no idea. They're just like, I don't know. And so we have to create and control that narrative.
I don't know.
Maybe it's a midlife crisis. Yeah, if we leave our narrative to them, it's not going to go well. So we have to create that narrative and promulgate it to them.
So when we're talking, I just think of you as synonymous with entrepreneurship, right? Because that's how I know you. And you've always had diverse income streams, speaker, author, courses, all coaching, all kinds of things. But at one time, you did have like a regular job that you would show up for. You were a journalist. So what happened?
I did. And in fact, I would probably still be a journalist today if things had not gone south. So I was a reporter. My first job out of graduate school was I was a reporter for a paper in Boston called the Boston Phoenix. It is now defunct, but before it was a cool paper. It was the cool kid paper. But before it went defunct, it made me defunct. And I was one of the first casualties on the way out as the print journalism industry was collapsing. And so I realized early on, it took me a while to operationalize this, but in a very sort of sudden and searing way. I mean, this is your first job, right? You realize, okay, the thing that seemed like the safe job that was giving me the paycheck every week or every other week, not so safe, because with complete impunity at a moment's notice, they can get rid of you. And these guys, they were very generous. You can imagine they gave me, it was a Monday, they laid me off. They gave me 4 days of severance pay. So I literally had 4 days to figure out how I was going to earn enough money to pay my rent. And they laid me off on Monday, September 10th, 2001. So the next day when I was going to be out job hunting, unfolded a little differently. So I was really thrown into the lion's den by these people, and it made me realize, oh wow, none of this is secure. I have to build my own security.
You just wrote about that, actually, the 20th anniversary of this experience on LinkedIn. Let me see if I can share it here. I'm going to share the whole thing. Y'all about to see all my exciting tabs.
We love tabs.
I know. Well, I am like I have a tab problem so much that I had to get a Chrome extension to address it. It's pretty extensive. So there's like 700 and something thousand.
Yes, this was a little wild. On Friday, it was in fact the 20th anniversary of my layoff from my job, and so I did a post, holding up my book, to try to encourage other people, because we have some dark moments if we lose a job or have some kind of a trauma like that. In my case, of course, it was the job loss compounded the next day by the terrorist attacks, where everybody thought, oh my God, is the economy ever going to recover? Are we ever going to be safe? I mean, it was a really kind of frightening time to be unemployed and to be trying to figure things out. And it seemed like it really resonated with people. I wanted to make the point that, 20 years later, I had hoped to build a career as a journalist. That was kind of foiled, but I was able, holding up this copy of the book, I was able to build something nonetheless. And so I wanted to try to put something out there for people who might be struggling now, that, if you work at it, if you take the small and consistent steps, 20 years later, amazing things can happen. This is now my 4th book, but it's been viewed, like, I think the latest was 776,000 times on LinkedIn. So that was kind of an incredible response.
Mr. Robert Collins says the Boston Phoenix captured the deep culture heart of Boston.
What a testimonial. Thank you, Robert. It did. I loved reading the Phoenix. I was such a fan of the Phoenix before I got to work there. And then I became less of a fan once I did work there. But nonetheless, it was always
the way, isn't it?
Yeah, seriously. But it was a great paper to read. I support that.
Joe Jaffe says hello. He has a new show. He has the same show, but it was called something else. And now I want to say it's like Joe Jaffe's not famous or something. Anyway, go check him out. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution. So you moved from reinventing you and personal branding into entrepreneurial you. Was that a reflection of your own journey and you wanted to share your knowledge? Or the way that Chris, when I was talking to him about having you on, put it to me was that you kind of sailed over all the other author speaker people. Like, you reached a whole new level of success. Is that what you talked about in Entrepreneurial You, is like how you did it, or did you keep some stuff back into it?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you in absentia, Chris, for the lovely compliment. That's very kind. But yeah, one of the points that I make actually in the long game, I tell a story about this woman that I met once who is an artist, and she was this very successful artist. Like, she has all these international commissions. She was quite famous, and so I met her, and of course, I'm always interested in people, how they grow their brand, how they actually break out, break through. Like, what is that moment? Because it's not that, people have always been famous, and it's really not, let's be honest, overnight they're famous. Something happens. There's a moment where the water freezes and turns to ice, right? There is this moment, and I wanted to understand what that moment was. And so I was asking her, I'm like, well, tell me about the process. Like, how did you break through? What did it look like? And she gave me this completely lame answer. She's like, oh, just do good work. And I knew she was lying. She's literally lying, because the truth is, this is an intelligent woman. She knows that's not the answer. There are a lot of people who work hard and do good work, and they never get noticed. I knew that she was smart enough and savvy enough to be perfectly aware of whatever she did, whatever her networking, whatever her process was. And she just wanted to preserve this image of like, oh, well, the best people get recognized. I guess it means I'm the best. I mean, F that. That's so insulting. And so I don't like that at all. And in my books, what I try to do is to really just open up and make the process as transparent as possible, because I really want good, smart people to be able to get their ideas heard. And I think it's so offensive when people pull up the ladder behind them if they've been successful and try to hide that information about, like, well, what did it take? What did it look like? I want to really be as open as possible so that other people have a fair chance of being able to get their ideas heard in the marketplace.
Oh, look who's chiming in. Fame is the weirdest piece of jello anyone could ever try to chase.
So true, man. So true.
That's so funny. Hi, Jane. So, you could tell us what the actual name of your show is, Jeffy, if you want me to say. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. So what you're talking about, I've seen people do. The other thing I've seen happen is people succeed in what's like a little kind of microcosm of time, where like there was a time during which you could succeed with blogging alone, right? Like blogging was all there was. And if you did it enough, because no one else was, you would attain a certain level of attention and success.
Well, I think Chris Brogan is a pretty good example of blogging taking you to great places. Absolutely.
There's tons, right? But the difference between what Chris does and what I've seen other people do is that he doesn't stop there and just kind of capitalize on the early earned success. He's continued to try and experiment and do other things, the show being like one of them. But other people, I think if they explained how they succeeded, they're kind of out of ideas, some people. But that's not you. So the book's loaded with ideas, and the approaches, I'm talking about Entrepreneurial You. We're not even on to the new book. We're going to get there in a second. But you detail things that are timeless, like they're perennial approaches that will work. So if you had to pick, like, say, 2 that you thought in a post-pandemic era would be the most beneficial to try, what would you do?
Yeah, well, thank you, Carrie. I appreciate it. So I would say, I mean, to kind of answer your earlier question, the way that I think about the books, I mean, for sure, having trained as a journalist, my impulse is always, there's a thing I want to figure out. How do I figure it out? And so, some people have, everyone kind of has their go-to, right? Like, I know people who their go-to is, I'm going to read history books and I'm going to tell historical anecdotes. And, for Malcolm Gladwell, for instance, his go-to is he reads like psychology and sociology journals and writes books about that. Those are very cool approaches. Mine, having trained as a journalist, is let me talk to some people. Let me interview people who have done these things so that I can learn from it. And so a lot of my books, it really is kind of this quest of figuring out a question that I want to understand. And so for my first 2 books, so I had, just in terms of the chronology, I had Reinventing You came first, and then I had Stand Out, which is a book about basically how to become a recognized expert in your field. And there we go. And those, I think, were really interesting journeys to excavate. But what I came to realize was I experienced this to a certain extent, although certainly I heard this in a lot of places, was there's a fascinating disconnect in contemporary society between being famous, quote unquote, or, being well known in a given field, and actually earning money. The people think that those correlate directly. They do not. You can actually be quite famous and have not a lot of money, or vice versa. And so I had really prioritized early in my career developing recognition around my expertise and attempting to do that. But I had not focused on money. And I was earning good money, but it was not like crazy good money. And so I realized in writing Entrepreneurial You, I wanted to solve this problem. I'm like, okay, maybe I should really focus on this now. This seems like a good idea, because I had peers and colleagues where, they'd be doing these like online course launches and it'd be like, rah, rah, and I made $3 million. I'm like, what? Like, how is that even a thing? So I interviewed a lot of people, about probably 50 people in depth, about basically just asking intrusive questions about how they earned money so that I could learn that for myself and share that with other people. So broadly speaking, if we're looking for a couple of tips, I would say if somebody is starting from scratch, I'm happy to answer all kinds of questions. The advice is different if you're a little further along, but if you're starting from scratch, I would say number one of the easiest things that you can do if you're looking for a side income stream is to think about doing consulting or coaching work, because it requires no startup expenses. I mean, that's the best thing, right? You don't want to lose money before you make money. You want to have something that you can just do it now, do it for free. And so coaching or consulting is a great initial starting point. And it also brings you very close to the market. It enables you to get very close to your target audience, to understand what they care about, what they're interested in, what their problems are, so that if you later want to do something more scalable, like a course or whatever, you know what to tackle. And then the second piece I would say is it is really useful as well to create a scalable asset. And at first, please be aware, it's going to take a while. You're not going to make money from your blog or from your podcast or from your video cast immediately. That really just doesn't happen. But it provides you with a powerful way to connect with and grow your audience. And over time, you can directly monetize it if it gets big enough. But you can also use that, since you've been growing your audience, as a way of making money on the back end from other things that you might sell, such as coaching or consulting or masterminds or courses. So those would be my two pieces of advice.
My erstwhile co-host is chiming in from In Absentia. He says, I only kept going because I saw my star falling faster than ice cream in a 3-year-old hand.
Chris, you are both poetic and very humble, my man.
He says my goodness. Being a journalist is very different than being an entertainer, or used to be. What did you do to change? And by the way, Dorie invests in Broadway shows. I don't know if you know that. So she's an entertainer, my friend.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think so there's a couple of great points here. So one of the concepts actually that I talk about in the new book, The Long Game, is basically applying a concept that many people who follow kind of business journalism will be familiar with, which is Google's 20% policy. Now, fun caveat, even people who work in Google now say, oh, that's not really a thing. Apparently only about 10% of people at Google actually do 20% time. So that's kind of interesting. But I think also very illustrative, because even at a place where it's purportedly encouraged, it's so much easier for people to just keep doing their thing and keep answering email and keep focusing on their main thing. But I think it is really valuable for all of us forcibly. We have to be really disciplined and forcible about this, to carve out 20% of our time for more experimental activities. Because when we do that, it is not only fun and interesting, hopefully, but it's also giving us a kind of professional development in a new area that helps us mitigate risk for the future. And so for me, but part of my quest here is in 2016, so 5 years ago, I created a 10-year goal for myself of writing a musical that would make it to Broadway. And so I am halfway through this. And let me tell you, I am miles away from where I started. Now, will I actually write a show that makes it to Broadway in 2026? I don't know. We'll see. We'll test it out. Fingers crossed.
Well, if you're casting.
Hey, awesome. I love it. I'm doing a sexy lesbian spy musical, Carrie.
Yes.
So I know you be rocking and rolling there. I love it.
Role.
Oh my God, your breakout. It's true. But now when I started, I didn't even know how to write a musical. Now I've written a complete musical. I've done a complete 2-year program in this kind of prestigious musical theater program run by BMI, the music publishing company. Even if you set yourself 20% of your time, over time it adds up. So it can help you move in new directions in a relatively painless fashion.
Get a comment from Jane. Tell Rob Hatch to add that to the 9 box, talking about Chris's partner at Owner Media. I have to do a couple of ads, but I want you to stay out here with me. Do you mind? This will be fun. I don't have to put anybody backstage to do these, but I want to thank our sponsors. We're sponsored by Castos.com. If you want to host an audio podcast, they make it super easy. You just upload your audio file and they syndicate it to all the places. Our friend Matt Medeiros there hooked us up, and it's pretty great. Dorie's had a little experience in podcasting. Would you like a .online domain? Because you can totally have one. Like you could get DorieClark.online if you want to for 99 cents for the first year. You just use the code Chris in all caps. I don't know why it's all caps, but it is. So remember I said that, and go get a .online domain. And we are sponsored by StreamYard. If you want to make a show just like this one, just go get your own brilliant entrepreneurship and self-reinvention expert, and you can totally do it. cbrogan.me/StreamYard. And we're sponsored by Presearch. If you want to search without giving Google more of your data, you can use Presearch instead. Excellent search engine, and they pay crypto rewards. Like if you log in, you earn crypto rewards just for using the thing, which is a great search engine, and you can stake keywords with your crypto. and make sure your site comes up when you want it to. So anyhow, Presearch, go check that out, presearch.com. Okay, Dorie, we did it.
That was amazing. I love it.
Thank you for your support. So let's talk about the new book. I don't have a copy of it because it comes out 9/21, but it is available for pre-order, and it is your latest thing, The Long Game. Let's talk about that. Where did that come from? Where did it come from? What happened?
Yeah. So in many ways, the books that I've written kind of build on each other. And one of the through lines of Entrepreneurial You, the book that you've kindly been waving, which is my last book, it came out 4 years ago, is that essentially as I was researching this book about, how do you make money? How does this work? I was employing what I was learning about creating online courses to launch my own online course and community called Recognized Expert. And it was really just starting. Like in the Entrepreneurial You, I talked about that process of launching it. I sort of lay out like, okay, here's how I piloted it, and here's I figured it out. I'm kind of like bringing the reader along the journey of doing it. But the long game, which I actually dedicate to members of the Recognized Expert community, is basically what I have learned 5 years into running this course and community. More than 600 people have gone through it, and this is basically for smart, talented professionals that want to find a way to grow their platform, to get their ideas heard in the world. And it's a noisy and crowded world, and so there are a lot of things that I experienced when I was starting my business or trying to, get my ideas heard more, that you're like an N of one. You're like, okay, well, maybe this is just me. I don't know. But when you have 600 people and you get to watch it up close, you really understand what the patterns are. You understand what the challenges or the snags are. And what I came to realize time and again is that so often good people give up too soon on their ideas and the things that they care about, because there is a big dark tunnel in between deciding to do something and actually getting to accomplish it. And in that dark tunnel, people often have no idea how long something is going to take or how long it's supposed to take, quote unquote. They are not getting any encouragement. They're not getting any feedback. And at a certain point, they're like, this isn't worth it. This isn't working. And I think oftentimes that is way too soon. And I wanted to create a book that was a framework for people. And I tried to do this in the long game to help them understand, when should you persevere? When should you keep going? And how do you sort of, master the resources that you need, the emotional, internal resources, as well as the external resources to persevere, even when accomplishing a long-term goal is not easy. And that was really what was behind my trying to do this.
So to go to the flip side of that coin, when do you cut bait on something? Like there's times to play the long game, and then there's times where it's just not the right thing for you. How do you know the difference?
Yeah, well, there's a few sort of tripwires, I would say. One, of course, is if there is a sort of marked change in external circumstances. If something externally has happened that changes the game, right? In some way, maybe a competitor in the marketplace has done a thing that undercuts it, or maybe there's like a leap forward in technology so that a thing is no longer relevant. That's an important inflection point where you say, wait, does this still make sense? So I think it's like, do you buy the taxi medallion, in 2017 after Uber has become a thing? I would say no. So that, the change in external circumstances, one. But the other thing that I think is really important, even dating back, there's common themes, right? Even dating back to Reinventing You, I talk about the importance of curating what I call a mentor board of directors. And part of the reason why I think this is so important is that when we are invested heavily, just really emotionally into a particular project, a particular thing, a particular course of action, we are often not very rational. And it can go in both directions, right? It can either go to, oh my God, this is never going to work. It's hopeless. I should just quit now. Or it can go to like, you're like the last man clinging to the life raft. Like, no, success is just around the corner, and you get manic. And so it's really important to have people who are not, they are smart, they care about you, they know your industry, but they are not emotionally invested the way that you are. And they can actually be the ones to be like, no, Carrie, no, keep going. This is a good one. Or, Carrie, maybe you better think about something else.
So Chris is getting kicked out of the coffee shop. He said He says, evidently, bring your own fondue isn't a thing. So let me ask the question that he had posed. Madonna famously at the time reinvented herself once a year. What's the right timing these days?
Such a good question. Yes, it's true. It's true. Our material girl. Well, I think, it depends, of course, on your field and what you're trying to accomplish. But if we're talking about, the business world or the professional world, I think that it's not necessarily that we have to be reinventing ourselves on a particular time frame. Every year people will get bored of us or something like that. In fact, actually, one way that I am going meta on the process of publicizing the long game is I actually feel like in retrospect, a mistake that I made was I will say in air quotes, giving up too soon on publicizing my previous books. I was always very keenly aware of the launch. Like, I've got to launch it well. I've got to, have a successful launch week. But then after that, I was like, basically, I would kind of kill myself and I'd be burned out and I'd be like, yeah, I'm like not ever going to go on another podcast for 3 years. And, this is a mistake, right? Because even if the launch is a big thing to you, if that's all there is, if there's like a week where people hear about you and then it's like, there's nothing, it's very easy for, in a crowded world, for people to forget. And so I have actually committed that with this book, with the long game, as a way of walking my talk, I am planning to promote this for the next 5 years. I have a 5-year promotional schedule in mind for this. So I'm not really reinventing myself at all. Like what I'm at least, for this immediate thing, what it reminds me of more than anything is I used to work in politics, and I was the New Hampshire communications director for Howard Dean's presidential campaign. And, when you have a candidate, what they do, literally, you have about 7 events per day for these poor guys. It's terrible. So, there's the breakfast event, there's the brunch event, there's the lunch event, there's the coffee, it just goes on and on.
Like hobbits.
It's amazing. It's awful. And they are giving this basically the same stump speech. They have modules and they switch them out depending on who the group is, but it's basically the same stump speech. And when you are the candidate and when you are the staff, you are so sick of it. You can't stand it. Like basically, these poor presidential candidates, and they have like 22-year-old staffers being like doing imitations because they've heard it so many times. But what you have to remember, if you are a disciplined person, if you are a disciplined candidate, you realize, okay, you're sick of it, your staff is sick of it, but these voters have never heard this before. And you have got to go out there and do it like it's the first time. And that's the mark of a professional. And so I think that actually you reinvent yourself when you want to, or you reinvent yourself when you need to. But I think that as a theme of the long game, I feel like where we err actually far more frequently is stopping too soon doing what we should do.
Joe Jaffe is not famous, says great share because everyone wants to know about your new book, but the reality is the old books are still full of value. I just referenced my first book I wrote in 2004. Now, granted, that depends, right? So if your book is like how to be number 1 on MySpace, well, maybe not. But I agree, all Dorie's books are still like super, super relevant. So the new book coming out in 5 years, planning to promote it, does that leave you time then to write another one? Like what else is going on in the next 5 years? How are you going to balance all of this?
I'm not that interested in writing another book for 5 years. I mean, it's a process that takes it out of you. I was very keen. I mean, this was part of a plan, plans have upsides and downsides, but actually I really did have a plan with this. When I created my first book in 2013, and I sold the contract for it in 2011, so this is now going back literally a decade, I was convinced that the publishing industry as we knew it was going to completely collapse. Now, it turns out that has not actually happened, but it was not improbable that it would. And I was worried the publishing industry would completely fragment and collapse. And so I thought, oh my gosh, there is still a reputational advantage to being traditionally published. And so I wanted to get in under the door before the door closed. I wanted to kind of max out that value. So I said, okay, what is going to establish me as somebody worth listening to, somebody, who has, for whatever it's worth, right? There's pluses and minuses, but, who has the seal of approval of a mainstream publisher. And so I decided that I would write 3 books as rapidly as I could. And that was really what I did. I was operating under the idea that like, okay, the best way to promote your book is to write another book and market it immediately. And there's something to be said for that. I put a lot of IP out into the world, and it did it did establish me as somebody who like, okay, well, she has a lot of stuff to talk about. So that's good. But now I want to try something different, which is to focus more intently on one body of work, one piece in the puzzle, which is the long game.
So there is a self-assessment people can get if they go to your website, dorieclark.com/the long game. What are you going to learn about yourself?
Yes. Yes. Well, strategic thinking, I think, is just such an important component to all of these things. Basically, the premise of the long game and the premise of the self-assessment is about how to apply the principles of strategic thinking to your own life and your own career. A lot of us do this at work, but when it comes to us, we don't necessarily always connect the dots. It's like the cobbler's children with no shoes. And so I wanted to try to make that much more accessible. So when folks get the long game strategic thinking self-assessment, it helps just kind of turn the lens on like, where do I want to end up? Are the actions I'm taking today leading toward that? And how can I be thoughtful about setting up the processes and the systems so that I actually have a far greater chance of arriving where I want to? I realized a while ago there was just a huge hunger for it. I did a class. It came out in, I think, 2018, maybe, from LinkedIn Learning about strategic thinking. And for the past 2 years, for 2020 and 2021, it has been the #2 most popular course on all of LinkedIn Learning. It has been viewed more than 1.2 million times. So I think there's a real hunger for strategy in our world, in our very unpredictable world.
Well, I was just talking about this with Chris, actually. A lot of people call things strategy, but it's really just planning. Like they're not quite there yet. We've reached that point in the show where we have to do something.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
So this is secretly my favorite thing to do, but when somebody is not here, I like to make him person of the day. So congratulations, Chris Brogan, on being person of the day for your own show, for getting owned for bringing your own fondue to the coffee shop. That gets you 1 apple, the status of person of the day. You just have to go to a store and buy it yourself and wash it really good before you turn it into like a tartlet or something. The other thing we do on every show, we ask everybody this question, everybody from Sir Mix-a-Lot to Sister Anne Flanagan to burlesque performer Ariel Helvetica. The question is, what goes in your backpack for success? Answers are as varied as a book you hate, like Whiskey Nate said that. Apparently you'll learn something from it. If it's the only book you have to read, you'll eventually learn something from it. Or beef jerky, or an extra set of teeth. It could be anything you want. Could also be something like hope for the future or patience. So what goes in your backpack, Dorie?
Oh, wow. Well, I was literally having, fight is too strong of a word for it, but I was having a heated discussion just last night about the value of go bags. And my interlocutor was anti-go bag and said that was too depressing and we shouldn't think that way. But I tend to want to do strategic planning for the future. And I'm a big fan of optionality more than anything. It's not like you need to use your go bag. You just need to have a go bag. So I'll tell you what I have in my literal go bag, which I think is a tool for success because you have to be alive in order to be able to succeed in the future. So if there is a natural disaster, if there is some kind of insurrection, what I have in my go bag is a number of bottles of Soylent, which is, the ultimate bro pancake mix that you somehow drink for sustenance. I don't know, but I have some.
Are you sure it will actually keep you alive? It could just be marketing.
Could be that. And more importantly, I'm pretty sure this will keep me alive and it's delicious. One of the greatest days of my life was when Reese's started actually selling jars of peanut butter that you could buy. That stuff is insane. And I have a jar of Reese's peanut butter in there because, if there's a hurricane, it'll at least make me happy.
It's like crack. You know what? I love that you didn't say a copy of my new book.
That's right. What should be in everybody else's go bag is the long game strategic thinking self-assessment and the peanut butter.
Yeah. If you got a go bag in your hand, you got some reinventing to do, unless you can pay somebody to like disappear your family and get you a job at Cinnabon. Totally. Whatever. So my Uncle Phil used to reinvent himself every so often. He actually was a musician And then the whole style of music changed. It went from crooner to, like the Beatles, basically. And that wasn't really his jam. And he was like, well, I'm going to have to do something. And what he ended up doing, I mean, I just don't think my family kind of expected it, but I'm not going to say we hated it. So he opened up the Yellow Pages and was looking for a place to work, got the want ads, put him out beside it. And when he got to a certain point in the alphabet, they didn't think he'd go all the way to Chippendales.